Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Master Chess Web Show, starring Grandmaster Nigel Davies and yours truly, International Master Andrew Martin, and we're both FIDE senior trainers. Now, this week we're going to feature a very famous event. It's exactly 50 years ago that Bobby Fischer played Boris Spassky in the so-called match of the century. But there are many chess players, myself included, who think that this was probably the best world championship match of all time, and that including fantastic matches such as the Karpov-Kasparov saga during the 80s and 90s. Obviously, everybody will have their own favourite game from this match, but we've picked out three particularly interesting struggles for you. And first question I'd like to ask Nigel, really, how do you compare the interest level in this match to the ones that we know today?
Well, it was just phenomenal. It was on the news all the time, and President I think Nixon was president, and he wished Bobby Fischer all the best in the match. He said America is depending on you, something like this.
Henry Kissinger was like that, wasn't it? Wasn't it Henry Kissinger who said that?
Might have been Kissinger. I think it was the. Yeah, he did get some support from or well wishes from high level US government officials, because he was taking on the Ruskies, in the deep dark days of the communist era.
Yeah, this was, of course, one of the things that made this match so infamous, really, the fact that this lone American, this lone wolf, was taking on the entire Russian chess think tank, and succeeding. He'd already obliterated poor Bent Larsen 6-0 and Mark Taimanov 6-0. And he even beat Petrosian 6.5, 2.5, fairly comfortable win in the semi-final. And here he was facing Boris Spassky. But the thing is, Spassky was a friend of his, wasn't he, really? You couldn't count Spassky as a kind of enemy of any kind or adversary.
Yeah. They had a sort of, it was almost like a sense of brotherhood, I would say.
Yeah.
They were, Spassky was very sympathetic towards Fischer. And, I don't know about Fischer, whether it was sort of reciprocated, because, I think he was just very self-obsessed. But, Spassky was, he was sympathetic towards Fischer. Tal was also sympathetic towards Fischer. And it was the other way around as well. In the interzonal Curaçao, in 1962, yeah. Fischer was the only person to visit Tal in hospital, right? None of his teammates did that, but Fischer went to see him, I don't know if he took him grapes or something, but he went to see him. He was, he made an effort. So.
Well, of course, one of the great things about this match and why it is so revered is the diverse nature of the games. I mean, it really was, for a World Championship match, extraordinary affair, with the players debating all manner of openings and doing things you just don't see today. I mean, you've got an unrelenting diet of Berlins and Petrovs, if you like that type of thing. What's the next World Championship?
Yeah, it's very... I think the thing is now that people are very intent on being kind of bulletproof with black, right, and neutralizing white's edge, and then you get high-powered computers investigating these things deeply into the middle game, and it's the game has changed immensely, I would say.
Yeah.
Just phenomenal how much it's moved on, and largely because of the influence of computers. I do actually think that it's caused severe damage to chess as a sort of game art form. Having these computers stomp their silicon boots all over it. It's keeping going more or less, but it's struggled a lot since computers have arrived. And yeah, so
one of the things that about this match, which is so interesting, was that how popular the match was. As you say, it was in the newspapers, on the TV, worldwide coverage. Now imagine if you transported this match into the internet age. I mean, you would probably have every single person on the planet getting interested in chess.
Yeah.
Because of the characters involved. I mean, Fischer, for all his faults, and he went, of course, potty at the end. He was a character which attracted attention, and you know, it's not as if he was a guy who couldn't play chess. He was probably, I mean, when he was 2780, after he beat was it Larson or Petrosian? I can't. When did he reach those heights?
I don't know. It would have been around
Probably
that
after
period.
Larson.
Yeah.
When you compare that with the ratings of today, you can see what a phenomenal achievement that was, to get to 2780 so far ahead of everybody else. And there are not many people at 2780 even today.
Well, I mean, I think the ratings have you know, have also changed in their nature since they lowered the floor, and you know, and the top players only play themselves and whatever. I don't think we can compare the numerical values then with what they are now.
No.
And you know, also standards now are probably well, the accuracy of play is probably higher, you know, largely because people are using computers for the first like 15, 20 or more moves. So these moves are going to be more or less perfect. And then after that, the players will be on their own, you know, on their own resources, and, you know, but they'll also have a lot of thinking time because they've automated the first part of the game. So it's very difficult to compare, you know, chess now with chess at that time. I don't know. Did you get interested in chess on the back of Fischer Spassky?
Well, I remember my first. I mean, I wasn't an early starter in chess. I only started playing chess really seriously when I was at grammar school, so 13 or 14 years old, and that was around 71. So my first experience of high-level chess was looking at a very small article by B.H. Wood in the Telegraph. And of course, Malcolm Payne does the Telegraph column in England these days, but back then it was B.H. Wood, and it was a very small column, and he was featuring games from the Fischer Petrosian match in Buenos Aires. So that was my first introduction, really. I missed out on Larson and Taimanov before that. Well, not missed out, but wasn't really that aware of them. But yeah, and then of course the Fischer, that really interested me, despite the fact it was a few words in a column and with a diagram and a one line of analysis. And after that, yeah, the Fischer Spassky match really caught my interest, and I'm sure I wasn't alone.
Yeah, it was it was quite something. I mean, well, I was 11 when the Fischer Spassky match started, and you know, I actually looked at the games. I had one or two school friends who were interested in chess, and we were looking at the games together, like with a set, you know, and you know, looking at the newspaper. I mean, that wouldn't happen these days. You know, and I got Gligorich's book on the match. That was probably the best book, but the Alexander book was very good as well, because he had a lot more than just the match in it. You know, so I got two books on the match. So I got Fischer's games. I got 60 memorable games. And then I discovered there were other players around other than Fischer, you know, and, you know, so my interest just took off from there. So let's get the screen share up here.
Well, I noticed one thing, Nigel, before we actually start. The first game I sent you is not the game that I intended to send you.
Ah, right. Okay.
So can we start with the second game, and I will quickly go to the database and pick out the right game.
Okay, that was the game. The first game was the one where Spassky blundered.
No, this is the first. Yes, it is, but I didn't intend that. The first game, I wanted that the very famous Queen's Gambit game, which was almost perfect.
Ah, right. Okay, let me.
So I'm quickly sending you the game. So perhaps you like, whilst I'm doing that, perhaps you'd like to kick off with the second game, the one where the Poison Pawn.
Yeah. Well, this game was number which game number was this? This was like 11 or something.
13, I think.
13. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So after losing the first game, Fischer got his bishop trapped in an endgame in what you know is supposed to be like a beginner's trap Right, presumably he thought he could get out of it, but he got his bishop trapped. Then he defaulted game 2, so suddenly Fischer was 2 points down. Right, then in the third game he played a modern Benoni, right, which was it featured a new idea of black playing knight to h5 when white could just double his pawns, and Fischer won that game. Then in game 4 it was a draw. Then I think game 5 might also have been a draw. And then game 6 Fischer won one of the most famous games that I think you might be trying to find. Is that the one?
I'm trying to find. I'll find it. Just carry on with this.
Okay. Well, as usual, we have glitches. Glitches are part of the show.
With all these screens open, it's tough to find the right game.
Right. Anyway, this was game. This was the game that Spassky won in fine style, and it showed the danger of Fischer going to his old favourites like the Najdorf, because Spassky was very well prepared for the Najdorf. Now, there's a lot of there are a lot of stories about these famous Russian training camps, but in the book Bobby Fischer versus the Rest of the World, there was a little insight into how these training camps worked, and they weren't actually as serious as a lot of people believed. They were like a group of Russian grandmasters, and they would do a bit of chess in the morning. Spassky was normally off in Moscow. He rarely attended these things, and he was enjoying the nightlife. The training camp, normally they packed up at lunchtime, got out the vodka and cards.
That was the training camp, was it?
Yeah. Well, they did chess in the morning, right? But they did produce some good stuff, but like only in, against the Najdorf. So we have a poison pawn Najdorf here.
I'll be with you in a sec, Nigel. Be with you in a sec, I promise.
Okay. This is one of the Fischer favourites, and now knight b3 was a surprise to shut in black's queen. The standard move had been rook b1 here, so then black played queen a3. Now bishop takes f6, g takes f6, bishop e2. So white is just developing. His bishop may go to h5. He wants to castle. Black played pawn to h5 to rule that out. White castled, and then black played knight c6. And now white played king h1, getting his king to safety. Black played bishop d7, and now there came this move, knight b1.
Yeah, the impact of such a move cannot be underestimated, because it's easy to see how that move could be overlooked. Yeah.
And there's suddenly a serious problem for black with the queen. Now if he goes queen a4, there's pawn to a3. When he went queen b4, then white just moved his queen away. And the problem now for black's queen is, where does it go? Because b6 has been covered. At the moment he's got a4, but then the knight coming to c3 is going to trap the queen. So suddenly black is in all sorts of trouble, and not seeing a way to get his queen out by normal means, he played this move, pawn to d5, which opens the center. White can just take. Right, now Timan would subsequently point out black's best defense here, which was knight e7, and then after a3 go to a4 to retreat to c6 and get the queen out that way. That was relatively the best thing to do, because d5, e takes d5, white recovers his pawn, and black's position is a complete wreck. Right, the king is sitting in the center. I mean, he goes knight e7, then white goes c4, and black's position is terrible. Where does the king go? So knight f5 is played. Now white goes queen d3, and black goes h4, hoping for some knight g3 check tricks based on the position of white's king.
Now, next move by Boris is a very good one.
Bishop g4. So what this move does is it's getting ready to block the h file in case of knight g3 check. So white can then just take and retreat the bishop to h3, and it also threatens bishop takes f5. So this puts black in a really parlous state. Knight d6.
One of the problems is his queen is still in trouble. It's still a significant target for white's pieces.
Yeah.
And pawns. As we're going to see.
And his king is in trouble as well. And really, this wasn't what Fischer had in mind when he played his poisoned pawn. He didn't want this kind of position.
Well, normally he would be able to negotiate these types of complications through hard work before the game and knowledge of the irrational positions the poisoned pawn often throws up. But this one is different because, as you said, black's king is stuck in the middle. He's got two significant problems. Number one, the king. Number two, the queen. And there's no real way to resolve them. White builds up quite slowly to this point, but now he accelerates.
He's also not pawn up, which is you know, a grave disappointment to poison pawn.
Yeah, I mean, if you're suffering, you expect to be material up for your pains, don't you? You know.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But, to be pushed around as he is going to be, a3 first, then c5. Well, he's got to play queen b5, relying on the fact that white's queen is unprotected, and now basically the winning move, queen to c3, with a pretty devastating double attack. Yes, the bishop on g4 is attacked, but the rook is attacked in the corner, as is the knight. Black's queen is still in terrible trouble. I mean, I think white might be threatening a4 as well.
Yeah.
So there are so many threats here that even Bobby Fischer can't deal with them. It's worth looking at a note by Timon here where he mentions the impossible looking move rook h7, and you think a4 would just win outright. Well, now he mentions bishop g7. And then white just calmly plays knight d4. And the queen is still incarcerated.
Yeah.
If he takes the knight, we take back, very calm again, and then just leave black in a state of, how can I put it? Disarray. That's quite polite, actually. But, yeah. So you can see the problem of Fischer is he hasn't been able to coordinate his forces. And whereas knight b1 today isn't thought to be too much of a threat, is it? There are ways for black to get out of the complications. The fact that, you know, this was a new thing at the time put so much pressure on Fischer that even he couldn't find the way through the complications. So queen to c3 is a bit of a killer. Black took the bishop, and now white again, very calm. He just played a4. Why take the rook when you can take the queen? Now, queen e2, can he do that? Let's have a look. There must be an answer to this. I mean, I imagine rook e1 is winning, but is there something quicker? Am I missing something?
Well, rook e1 looks pretty good because there's still going to be a knight and rook on prise even when you won the queen.
Yeah, there's just
you've got knight e4. You can just
take it. Just take it.
Yeah, threatening knight f6 check as well, and the queen is still in trouble.
So basically, after a4, it's curtains, and black gave up more or less, sacrificing the queen. But there's not really any hope. Well, black's position split in two halves. You know, he can't communicate with his army can't communicate with each other.
Yeah.
So knight f5, cheapo alert. Boris doesn't seem interested. The Armada sets sail. Bishop to c8, setting him up for the next game, which won't be long in coming. F takes e6. Rook fe1. Boris is enjoying himself. Bishop to e7. And Boris carries on enjoying himself.
And
Fischer
that was the end of that.
Not many people around that time gave Bobby Fischer such a comprehensive spanking. I think that's the best way to describe it.
Yeah.
And so this was hailed as a great achievement by Spassky. Spassky's bashing the match. The crowd went wild, and we would see how Fischer could recover from this beating. And of course, if we drop back to knight b1, I mean, I think we can see why this was so difficult to envisage in advance. Who discovered that move? Do you know? Go back to here.
Well, presumably it was one of the training camp. Though got into trouble in the Sicilian in 1 or 2 games with Soviet players. There was a Petrosian game as well from that match where Fischer was in all sorts of trouble in the opening.
I think that was game 1, wasn't it? The Pelican game.
Yeah. And so the Soviet collective effort, they did find 1 or 2 little holes in Fischer's openings. Also, the 2 Knights Caracan, that was quite a famous one. So they've been sort of ganging up on him for years, but without supercomputers. It was still all, just the, the pocket set and the bottle of vodka stuff in the Dachau on the outskirts of Moscow. So these days, of course, things have got to a whole new level with, unbelievable computer prep and everything. I don't seem to have that other game yet.
Well, I have sent it to you via email. So I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Whilst you're looking for that, I'm going to move on.
Which game was it? I can probably do it at my end.
It was the Queen's Gambit game, number 6, I think. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Let me just find that.
Shall I move on?
Yeah, you move on while I just.
Okay.
I will just put it up in a.
Well, the next game is one of my favourites from the match. It's an amazing game all the way through, and it came later in the match where Spassky probably needed to win to have any hope of catching Fischer up at this point. And it features an opening which today is almost unheard of at a grandmaster level, let alone in the World Championship match. I mean, it has period when it comes and goes, the Alekhine defence, but the thought of playing the Alekhine in a World Championship match these days is very tough to imagine. Now Nigel's fiddling with it.
Sorry about that.
Changed the game. Let's go back. Before I was so rudely interrupted. No, that's the wrong game. There we are. Okay, this show would not be the same if it was flawless. Okay, that's the only excuse.
No way, it's going to be flawless.
The only excuse I could think of at the moment. So here we have the Alekhine defence, and in a way, this is I think something Spassky will be happy to see, because it shows, one, that Fischer is not overly happy about the Sicilian defence, and 2, he's being shunted into his second choice of opening. I mean, he also played the Perk in this match, didn't he, if I remember correctly?
Yeah.
So he's trying all sorts of stuff, and he had played the Alekhine with success earlier in his career, but as Nigel points out, this was in the days before exhaustive and exhausting analysis.
He also
so
played 1e5 for a little while when he was young, but
yes,
then he decided he didn't want people lower rated than himself getting away with a draw, which is something I can understand.
Yeah,
and so he switched things up to the Najdorf, which that allows black to play for a win.
It became his staple opening, did it not?
Yeah,
as with many world champions such as Garry Kasparov.
Yeah.
So here we have the hypermodern spirit. Bobby Fischer playing g6. Again, a move which today isn't played very often. In general, when black comes to this position, they generally take on e5 here. And when white takes back with the knight, they generally go c6 these days. I think Magnus Carlsen's done that, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Variation which Tony Miles was very fond of. I think it's called the Kingis variation, is it? Or is that G6?
That's G6 after D takes E5.
You often find that these two moves transpose into one another, because especially after moves like bishop C4, black often has to play C6 anyway. But that is today. Back then, G6 was thought to be a decent move. And in fact, Grandmaster Lev Albert used this variation with great success throughout his career, winning open tournaments and things like that in America. He played the Alekhine as his first choice opening for many, many years. So G6, there we are. And Boris played bishop C4. So this is an interesting move because it tries to force black to misplace his knight on D5. Black would quite like to leave that knight in the center. But they usually drop back, and then white drops back, and white feels that he's won this small mini battle in the game because the knight on B6 isn't that great. Now, black, of course, can play C6 here. And I guess that probably goes back into the Kingis variation. But that's thought to, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that move. It's just perhaps a little bit passive, because you sometimes rather have your knight on C6.
I think the with all the Alekhine lines, the big issue is that white controls more terrain. So even if you take off an E5 and white takes back, then white's got a little space advantage.
Yeah.
If you can get C5 in as well, then you might be able to neutralize that space advantage. But all of this requires quite a bit of effort on black's part. This line, you've got to watch out for knight G5 and F4 as well.
Well, in fact, that is the main line after bishop G7, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Knight G5.
Yeah.
And then if black wants to play E6, that was Lev Albert's move, his favorite move. Very complicated stuff. If he plays D5, then the bishop on G7 starts to look out of the game, and black struggles to get it back into the game. But again, this is a main line, and I think I've seen Nigel shortly just play a quiet move, Queen E2, just to keep that pawn on E5. So all these things are available to white. I mean, I'm a bit surprised Spassky didn't play knight G5, but his choice of his next move really shows, I think, that he's probably been surprised. Because knight BD2 is not it's not a mainline move, and it doesn't really put pressure on black as such. It doesn't force him to misplace his pieces. It doesn't force him to block the center. It's a non-committal move, really. Apart from development, what is white doing? Apart from blocking in his bishop on C1, it's not a critical move in this position.
Yeah, I think it says a lot about Spassky as a player that he was known not to be incredibly hardworking. So if people sort of fed him preparation, you know, and sort of say, well, look, Boris, play this, then that was fine. And, you know, but he didn't do enough work to sort of stay on top of all the sidelines and everything. You know, he probably he just had a life outside chess.
Well, I should also mention if we drop back one move, the A4 is a very stern test of black's resources in this variation as well.
Yeah.
Again, with a view to just hitting that knight and carrying on in aggressive style. So with all these aggressive options available, slightly surprising to see Spassky going knight BD2, and Fischer was probably quite happy now, really. White's playing quietly, but he's not putting on any pressure. And H3 is another non-committal move, really, just taking away bishop G4 from black and saying to black, well, where are you going to put this bishop? I mean, of course, he can put it on F5. So we will see how the game develops. Anyway, Fischer played A5. And now white's got another choice, really. How do you defend against A4? Do you play A4 yourself? Do you play A3? or do you just play C3? It's quite a difficult choice. I mean, white played A4. That's kind of like an automatic move, isn't it? It sort of moves. He plays A5. Well, I must play A4.
Yeah, yeah. But
I mean, I just wonder whether that was best.
Well, he's got a problem in that black takes on E5 and then plays knight A6 to C5, which is the game. And then suddenly black gets a really good position.
Yes, of
So,
course, that move has that idea has more impact when White's played a4. Let's try c3. What would you do? The same thing.
well, now there might be, yeah, maybe you
Do you play a4 first or not?
possibly play a4 first,
And then even a3. I don't know. Maybe not.
yeah, undermine that diagonal, and then hit the e pawn with knight c6.
I mean, we can play the same idea. Let's have a look. So you take this. Now, what do we do? Take with the knight?
I doubt it somehow.
Well, okay. Try the same thing.
Yeah. Well, now the knight can even come into d3.
Yeah, I mean, that looks fine for black, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Going to get one of his bishops.
Yeah.
After which, White has nothing. So maybe White was. I mean, you could go a3. That looks. And then we're certainly going to go a4. Now, do we just do the same thing? I mean, the knight on c5 is looking like it's a very good square. Maybe he goes.
Maybe you can even attack the e pawn with knight c6 and rook a5.
Yeah, yeah, that's a very interesting suggestion. Yeah, rook a5. So he plays queen e2.
Yeah.
Knight d4.
Or rook a5 straight away.
Well, then he goes e6, doesn't he?
Well, you might take that.
Yeah, you've got amazingly active play, haven't you? Do we take it with the pawn or the bishop?
Bishop takes.
Yeah, White's way behind in development.
Yeah, queen takes check, king h8, and you can't play knight g5 because of rook e5 check.
Well, we have to castle then.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how this works out.
And then at the very least, queen d5 or something.
Oh yeah, but that's a kind of yeah, queen d5 is obviously a fine move. I was looking at rook a f5.
Yeah, you probably do that as well. Probably good in blitz, that one.
Yeah, yeah. It just shows how much blitz I've been playing.
Double exchange sack on f3 is coming.
To the detriment of right. Yeah, followed by knight d4. I was thinking about that.
I knew. I just knew.
Well, what can he do about that? He's paralysed. He's paralysed.
If he moves his knight, it's just a single exchange sack.
I actually believe that if you get rook takes f3 with only one exchange, I believe it then. Anyway, let's not bore the audience with our tactics. This is a hell of a long game. White played a4. So yes, this was a very good maneuver, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And the next move is also very interesting. Queen e8. I hasten to add, I did not put those arrows in. It looks a bit of an overkill. Whoever put those arrows in is very keen to take the 4 and a4.
Oh, he's obviously trying to make a point, you know. I think the red arrows work particularly well, you know, when you can point them at the king, right? Then you can sort of really show, you know, with all this red that a position's bad. May not be bad, but you know,
it looks a bit of an
bad when you've scrawled enough red over it.
Can we actually say that black is threatening to take the a4 pawn?
Well,
and this is exactly what he does. So no more red arrows. And the question really is, has White got enough?
Well, I think that's probably a no.
It's hard to believe that White has got enough here. Although he's threatening queen c4, isn't he? Mind you, black can easily deal with that threat by moving the knight back. I mean, I think one of the things White's got going for him is the fact that bishop on g7 is a bit restricted. But
yeah,
I don't think that. And black's got two bishops. Why should he anyway be inconvenienced? And then that kind of tends to prove it, really. I mean, Spassky's just shunting the pieces around, hoping something's going to turn up. But yeah, basically, this opening's been a big success for black, hasn't it?
Oh yeah.
White played too quietly. This is something, you know, Alekhine players are looking forward to. You know, white not knowing specific sharp lines, and then black can not take over the game, but he can certainly get a very comfortable game coming out of the opening. So Spassky's really fishing for chances here. And this move would be a continuation of the fishing process. I'm not sure Boris would want to play that move unless he felt he had to. But here we go, knight to d4. So what black's moving around this bishop quite a lot. Now you would expect rook d8 here, wouldn't you?
Was there a threat of knight f6 check?
Well, that's what I'm thinking, probably. So let's check this out. If rook to d8, we come in here. Got to take it, right?
Yeah, you've got to take it, and then just pawn takes and veils an attack on the queen.
And then when he takes the bishop, there's an attack on the rook. So that is a killer.
Yeah.
Right, okay, so that explains the next move, which is essentially queen d7 to get out of that threat. Not a pin as such, because white can unpin with knight f3, but perhaps black does now threaten rook a d8 himself. So rook a d1, Spassky protects the knight. Rook f e8, some care is required. f4. Yeah, the constant moving of this bishop. It doesn't really inspire, does it?
Yeah.
But of course, I guess black would argue.
It's not a good square.
White's weakened his king side. All this pushing pawns forward on the king side, it's very, very sharp. Yeah, got to be very careful. Anyway, queen to c3, e6. Do you think Fischer just thought, oh, I'm going to consolidate this position when he took on a4 and got a bit careless?
Were there some improvements for him? I mean, Fischer liked pawns a lot.
Mm.
You know, he did like to take pawns, and he was willing to, to inconvenience himself to take them.
Well, it still doesn't look as though black is in too much trouble here. His main problem is manufacturing counterplay.
Yeah.
He's defending at the moment, and Spassky doesn't want the pieces off. So c5, here we go. Knight to b5. That's a big square on d6, letting him in. And now Fischer is relying on his next move. Queen takes. And games like this really, show how chess has changed. You couldn't imagine a game of this type taking place in a World Championship match today. Yeah. There are too many. How can I put it? Imprecisions.
Yeah, the opening in particular. Then these days people make sure that they've got a very complete repertoire in all variations.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult to to surprise them with anything.
I mean, what's noticeable about chess then and chess today? A lot less mistakes. And chess often functions on mistakes. It's one of the things that makes the game interesting. People making mistakes. This is what we like. This is what
mutual mistakes. Yeah.
And the second thing is the lack of variety. Tremendous variety. You don't know what's coming next in these matches. But today, you kind of know. You kind of know what's coming next.
There's a good chance there'll be a Petrov, and if not that, a Catalan.
So I think the combination of the two things, the lack of mistakes today, clear-cut mistakes, which we can all debate and enjoy, and the lack of variety. This is why these matches were kind of more interesting as a spectator event. So what have we got here? We've got Fischer defending himself here. We've got opposite colour bishops on the board. Who can get the initiative first? And I think Boris is fighting for initiative with this move.
He's trying to break up the the dark square control.
Yes, in order to get e5.
Yeah.
So I think black has got to cede control of e5, which white's happy to reinforce. In comes to f7. And now, despite the fact that white's a pawn down, I don't think he's worse at all. Black's got to be careful.
Yeah.
Black's got to be careful. That pawn on d6 is huge. Another red arrow comes to the fore. You know, I would never have guessed that white's threatening to push that pawn on.
I'm surprised there's not another arrow with the bishop going to f6.
Or the pawn on a4 heading down towards a1. There should, at least.
Then, could do another one. And then another one with the rook going to f1, f4 and h4 and h7.
There are also threats to black's king. It's true. So the game's turned around here a bit. And
you need nerves of steel to play this with.
Rook h8.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
Because you're under quite a lot of pressure.
Fischer's trying to buy Spassky off. Because, of course, if he takes the rook, black's king will come round to d6 and take the d6 pawn. And then white will have to face the queenside pawn armada, despite the fact he's exchange up. I think it'd be difficult for him. So Spassky doesn't take the exchange.
Yeah.
Here comes the pawn. No red arrow to be seen. Still no red arrow, despite the fact it'd only be very short.
Probably wasn't worth it. Oh, nice red.
We apologise for any interruptions.
Covering A1, I wouldn't have spotted that otherwise.
Well, it is a key move.
Yeah.
Anyway, off comes the pawn. On goes the pawn. And we're quickly going to reach an extraordinary position. And now, this was around the time, what was it? A German then, wasn't it? 40 moves in 2.5 hours, followed by a German.
So we got the two analysis teams, Boris Spassky and the entire Soviet Union versus Fischer and the Reverend Will Lombardy. I know who I would normally have my money on.
Well, funnily enough, chess, sometimes it's better off just you analysing the position yourself.
Yeah.
One mind is often better than many. This position is irrational. So rook check. Let's have a look. Well, he's probably got to play c3, hasn't he? I mean, I think if he moves his king, black can take off on h3. And then I don't think...
sacrifice his rook for the new queen.
Well, you've got to go to f2, haven't you?
Yeah. Then,
take this.
Yeah, queen.
He makes queen. We've got to take that. Take this.
And then pawn to e5 traps this rook.
Yes, and now suddenly, what is white to do?
He doesn't have anything to do.
No. In its own right, that's an extraordinary line. So he must block. Over comes the other.
So he's threatening to queen.
Rook h4, as you pointed out many moves ago, and Fischer must give his king some air. There's a check. Up he comes. There's another check. Here he goes. Rook takes e5. A check. Further check. Yes, and now this is another critical position, isn't it? Because black's got to give up his bishop. Don't think there's any choice, is there?
No.
I mean, we look at this game at a distance of 50 years and we can marvel at the complications, but imagine the tension and the difficulty involved in playing this match at a world championship level.
Yeah.
Tremendous stuff. So king takes.
Have lots of fun trying to analyse the adjourned position themselves. Then there's always the danger that the arbiter is going to lose the envelope. right? Because we had this quaint tradition at the time of sealed moves, whereby you write down your next move and seal it in an envelope and then sign across the seal, right? And the arbiter hopefully won't lose it. Meanwhile, otherwise, I think you lose the game if the arbiter loses the sealed move, right? And yeah.
So on we go. He's pushed the king to the A file to block it, and now he offers the exchange of rooks. But the pawns seem really as though they're hardly likely to be denied. Another red arrow comes to the fore. This really is an extraordinary game, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
So the threat is C3, rook A1, last chance saloon. There are pawns on the other side. And now get this incredible position, and the red arrow comes into the frame once again. And now what an incredible position this is.
So that rook on G8 is basically dead, but meanwhile black has got this flotilla of 5 passed pawns to tattle the rook.
Yes, it's a good job he's got his F pawn. That's all I can say. That can act as a decoy at certain moments, can't it? Well, black's just threatening to bring his king in and advance the pawns. I mean, it's really is as simple as that. So white brings his king across to defend. And now we get this incredible position where Fischer sacrifices one of his pawns in order to get his king in.
Yeah, because you can't cross over the D file at the moment. So this is why he has to go H1 equals queen in order just to be able to get king D5.
So if he goes F4, are we running out of moves? Are we completely out of moves here after something like that?
Well, I suppose you can still sacrifice.
Let's say you go there. And we just come back, right? Well, okay, I'm happy with the draw here.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you can see the next move is well, Fischer's trying to win. So he managed to get his king in. And now this is the critical moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
where black essentially wins the game after the check. Then he comes in. Now let's drop back. So white has got to try and avoid that position.
Yeah. So rook.
So how about check?
Apparently.
Can't go to E4 because he takes on C4, so must come here. And now this. And if king E4?
Then rook back to C3.
And that's just a draw, right?
Threatening to take the pawn with
Take all
check.
the pawns in that case, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if I've taken on C4, then play rook C1.
Yeah.
I can then take on B3 and then take on A2. And if you queen, I'll just... It's a, then
Yeah.
So rook D1 check. Looks like the decisive mistake because he can come in. But unfortunately, that move whilst it has to be played, lets the rook out of jail. And black won. White resigned.
Yeah, the threat of rook takes d4 followed by king e2 is what caused the resignation, because the rook doesn't have enough checking room.
Yeah, I don't see any way to stop that.
If you move the bishop, then simply rook d1.
Well, I mean, that was an extraordinary game, wasn't it? It really was. It must have taken an enormous amount out of them.
Yeah.
And complications all the way through. Fantastic stuff. I really enjoyed that game.
And I think, I mean, the degree of engagement by having this adjourned position being looked at by everybody throughout the world.
It's probably, was it not adjourned twice? I mean, we're on move 76.
Yeah, I think it must have been twice.
Yeah.
You know, so Lothar Schmid did a very good job in not losing either envelope. not having him having it nicked by the KGB either.
Well, that was another fantastic game. So let's move on to the game which I was trying to find earlier. I meant to send at the outset, but foolishly didn't. Sent another one. This is, I think, probably thought as the best game of the match. I don't know. It may not be the most interesting game of the match, but it's an almost flawless performance.
Well, this game is the Rai Lopez game 10 as well. The Breyer.
That's true.
That was also a fantastic game.
You could literally have 3 or 4 shows on this match with all the decisive games being featured. They're all interesting from one perspective or another. Now, as Nigel's a great expert on the Queen's Gambit declined, I'm going to let him introduce this game.
Right.
Well, Fischer, one c4.
Yeah. So 1c4. Now, because of the Sozin game, I think it was game 4, wasn't it? Where Fischer played one of his favourite lines against Spassky Sicilian and basically hit a brick wall. He then switched to playing 1c4. Yeah. Which must have come as a huge surprise to the Spassky team, because Fischer had gone on record as saying 1e4 is best by test. But
it wasn't unknown. It wasn't unknown for him to play c4. I think he played against Anderson and Mecking, didn't he? Or I think somebody else.
Really minimal number of games.
Yeah.
You know, so I don't think the Russians took this possibility very seriously, but in retrospect, perhaps they should have done. Now, Spassky, throughout his career, was a great specialist in the Queen's Gambit declined with black. And in particular, the variation that features in this game, the Tartaková-Makoganov-Bondarevsky variation.
To
give it its full title, some people just call it the Tartakova variation. And it begins when black plays b6 here. So he's trying to develop this bishop on b7. Tartakova was the first person to play this. And Tartakova realized that h6 was a useful move if you want to take back with a knight on d5. Because if you don't do that, say if you play b6 in this position and white takes here and you take there, then there's going to be positions where white can play bishop d3 and queen c2 and gain a tempo against this pawn on h7. So Tartakova decided, using his own brain power, that it would be very useful to have h6 in this position. And it then became, you know, a really well-known line. It's you know, part of the staple diet of Soviet chess players since then. You know, so you had
Karpov and Kasparov.
Yeah, Karpov and Kasparov, you know, were also playing this Queen's Gambit decline Tartakova variation.
Fischer played it himself.
Yeah, Fischer played it himself. Famous game against Bertok.
I just going back a couple of points here. First thing, point about h6. When you play this move with black, you've got to be alert to one thing, that white might be able to play g4, g5, because you're giving him a hook to latch onto your kingside pawn formation. So as long as you're very confident that you can beat back an attack with G4, G5, then H6 is a good move. And secondly, black has not moved the pawn on C7. And this is very important because it means you can get C5 in one move. And in the classical variations where black plays knight B7, you often see him playing C6 and then C5 later. You know, you're saving time with this procedure. So these are two important points to note about the Tartakova. Well, it's still a very reliable system, isn't it, Nigel?
Yeah, so to this day. You now what they do, there's one or two systems where they for example, if white misses out e3 and plays rook c1, then I think they then play the Lasker variation, you know, but it's still got a really good, really solid reputation. And it's more interesting than a lot of the Queen's Gambits where black is just intent on sheer equalization. The Tartakova keeps more play in the position.
Okay.
Now we have bishop takes e7, queen takes e7, knight takes d5, e takes d5. Going to a very important point here, that a lot of beginners want to just play bishop b7 on autopilot because they've started a fianchetto. But actually, bishop e6 is a much better move because the bishop is far more actively placed here. You're still going to play c5 and go for hanging pawns, but you know, but with the bishop much better. And sometimes black's queen will come over this way and he plays knight d7 to support these hanging pawns that we get. Now, I think the system Fischer played in this game with queen a4 and queen a3 and bishop b5 has now more or less been discredited. It's no longer thought to be at all dangerous. Here, white more usually now plays bishop e2, c5, and then, for example, b3, which is quite an annoying line for black because then black can't move his pawns forward very easily. So, well, let's see the game with queen a4, c5, queen a3, pinning the pawn on c5, getting ready to weaken this. Black goes rook c8. And now white plays the provocative bishop b5, which gets an X-slam in these notes, but I'm not sure it's a great move. Black goes a6.
Yeah, this is a moment where he could have done better, isn't it? Isn't queen b7 the move?
Well, he could have done better later as well. I think he had some other improvements too.
Isn't Geller played queen b7, isn't he? Is that right?
Yeah, but I think it's not the only point. I think there was an improvement on move 16 as well. So queen b7 on move 16 or queen a7 is also better, but a6 was probably a little bit careless. So we got
I mean, your earlier point about white playing bishop e2 and b3, then queen b7 wouldn't be a threat at all because the b2 pawn would have advanced itself and be protected.
Yeah.
Because it's important after queen b7 that when everything comes off, black can play queen takes b2.
Yeah. And also b3 stops black's often a strategic threat of playing c4 to set up a queenside pawn roller. So yeah, so b3, that's not a bad system. Actually, if white wants something against the Tartakova that's not that well known.
Very difficult to lose with it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost an unbeatable system unless, you know, you make some mistakes later on. So here we now get castles and black plays rook a7 to unpin. And this was thought to be quite an important moment. Queen b7 was suggested by Geller in this position too. Also, queen a7 was suggested by Larsen to threaten to take the bishop and also cover this pawn on c5. And these probably were both improvements over what Spassky actually did.
I mean, you can see why he doesn't go queen a7, can't you? Queen b7 looks somehow more natural than queen a7 somehow. I don't know, it just...
Yeah, well, it protects the c-pawn. Sometimes you play a5 in these positions as well.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, Queen B7 looks more active because you're on the B file, but Queen A7 and A5 and Knight D7, maybe Black's position's not too bad there.
Also, with the Queen on B7, you can play A5 and Queen B4. That's also quite a nasty position.
Oh yeah, that's often a theme as well for Black.
Anyway,
yeah. So
Rook A7.
Yeah, Rook A7, and now White retreated the bishop to E2. So it still looks, it's probably still dubious to play C4. White gets the D4 square. Sometimes Black does do C4 in order to try and target the pawn on B2. But here Spassky plays this move, and then there was a very famous transaction. Fischer plays Knight D4, and of course Black can't take. Now what people probably didn't expect was that he would then swap this apparently very active knight for the apparently quite passive bishop on E6. But he did that, and then he immediately set about attacking these pawns with pawn to E4.
Yeah, this is a marvelous move, isn't it?
Yeah. Now White, he wants to take on D5. Probably Black should just let him and play Knight F6, because when he played this move, D4, he allowed White's bishop to come to this fantastic diagonal, the A2 G8 diagonal, where it just dominates the position. He goes F4 first, but this C4 square is not going to run away. So now Black's pawns look very compromised. And on Rook B8, White plays Bishop C4, putting the bishop on a really great square and targeting this weak pawn on E6. And now if Black plays Knight B6, which looks like, you know, it should be the move, then White has got this nice blow with Queen takes C5.
Yeah, that is nice.
And he can also do Queen B3. Right, that's also good. But Queen takes C5 is deadly, because Queen takes C5 by Black. Then you play Bishop takes E6 check, and next move you take back the Queen. So after E5, Rook B8, Bishop C4, Black played King H8. Now White increases the pressure on E6 with Queen over to H3, and at the same time he's bringing his pieces in into the game against Black's king. So,
okay, so he played Knight F8, didn't he?
Yeah.
Just show me what you would do after this. I mean, I think there'll be people in the audience asking.
Well, we'll take on E6 with the bishop, right?
Yeah, bishop, and then I fall back.
And then bishop back to C4.
Now then, are you actually threatening anything here?
Well, I would be putting up some red arrows with bishop D3, Queen F5, and whatever, or Rook C E1 and F5 and F6. More red arrows going all the way up to G7 and E7. No green arrows for Black.
I've seen enough of that terrible position. Okay, please carry on.
Right, so Knight F8.
But that's fully defensive, isn't it? You know.
Yeah, it's going back.
B3. Now he plays B3. He got it in after all.
A5.
And
now White breaks through with pawn to F5. So this again is a very good illustration of Fischer's style, because Fischer was always very flexible about how he traded advantages. He didn't hang on to one kind of advantage. He would sort of flow through and change the advantage that he had into another kind of advantage. And here we've got a very powerful initiative and kingside attack coming from these active white pieces. Now you just don't do.
Also ruthless in winning positions. He didn't mess up winning positions, did he?
Yeah.
And this is, I think, good enough to be considered winning.
Oh yeah. So if you just don't want to play rook f7 here because of knight g5, but when he builds up like this, then black's position is truly dire. So now knight g5, you can just move the queen, and then even kick the knight with h4 next move probably.
With no rush.
Yeah, black goes queen d8 and white goes queen g3, building up. Rook e7, h4.
Just restricting that knight.
Yeah, and there's really nothing black can do. I mean, he plays rook here. You know, it doesn't really do anything. And now white plays pawn to e6, readying a potential invasion on f7.
Yes, I have nothing to suggest.
Yeah.
Black's position is just too passive.
Yeah. So all he can do really here is shuffle around. Queen e8, pawn to a4 just stops any move with black playing a4. Maybe white will play bishop b5 someday, you know, if he needs to cover the queening square for that e6 pawn. Queen d8, rook 1 to f2, queen e8, rook 2 to f3. Obviously enjoying the situation, as one does. Queen d8, bishop d3. So here we've got concrete threats building that white wants to play queen e4 and then,
well, rook f8.
Decisive threats, yeah, rook f8 and with a mate on h7. So we get queen e8, queen e4, and now if black plays this move, then we have take here, check, takes, and queen h7 mate.
Very reasonable.
Yeah. So black, probably with a very heavy heart, plays knight to f6, whereupon obviously white is going to sack to break up black's king position. G takes f6, rook takes f6. So now the threat is to take on h6. Well, there's many threats here. King g8, bishop c4, getting ready for rook f7. Black plays king h8, and white finishes the game with queen f4, threatening rook f8 check, threatening rook f7, threatening all sorts of things.
So, is not bad.
Yeah. So black's resignation is well and truly understandable.
And didn't Spassky break into applause after the game?
Oh, that wouldn't be done these days. You know, I can't imagine Magnus applauding his opponent.
No, but I think that was one of the unique points of this match. Fischer was very touched by this gesture by Spassky, who felt that Fischer had played a perfect game. Yeah,
yeah. It really was a brilliant game. So I think at this stage, what was the score at this stage? Was game?
Well, I think it was. Was it not? Let's have a look. What happened in game 5?
Yeah, so game 4 was a draw.
Either 2-2 or 2-1.
Yeah. No, well, Fischer won game 3.
There's
game 4 was a draw.
2-2.
Game 5, I think, might have been a draw as well. So this equalised the match.
Yes.
And then Fischer soon took a lead. Right. So, you know, after starting with this 2 loss, 1 by default, he almost took the plane home again when he was 2-0 down, and you know, suddenly you know, he was ahead. Now the other very sporting thing that Spassky did is he agreed to Fischer's demand to play in a private room at the back for game 3. Right, so you know, again, Spassky, I think the Soviet authorities wanted him to just win the match by default and get rid of this pesky American altogether. But Spassky agreed to play the match in the private room and saved the match, basically.
Yeah.
You know, so it was incredibly sporting. And,
yes, again, I don't think you'd see that level of sportsmanship these days. Any small advantage, they tend to hone in on, don't they?
Yeah, yeah. So, you know, it was a tremendous match on many different levels, not just...
Well, I can't see a modern-day player being offered a sponsorship by Coca-Cola for $1 million or something and turning it down straight, saying, I don't drink it. You know?
I
I believe that's what Fischer
like
did.
hair cream or something that Fischer turned down.
I think it was Coca-Cola, was it? There was,
Oh,
he had
something else.
a number of sponsorship deals which he turned down.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, you know, it was just. I mean, it perhaps he should have compromised a little bit, you know, and he might have had a better life. He might have been able to afford some really good psychologists, electric shock treatment or something. You know, saved his marbles.
All right. Well, okay. So that was our celebration of one of the greatest matches, which took place 50 years ago this year.
Yeah.
And we hope you enjoyed it.
Instead of our finishing the candidates matches, which I guess we'll do that next week.
Yes.
Candidates tournament.
That's right. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. We're going to finish it off.
Yeah. So this just seemed like much more fun to do. So we varied our scheduled show, put this up instead, and yeah, we will be back next week. So next Wednesday, going to do Wednesday.
Yeah, we're moving to Wednesday. Yeah, and we might take a summer recess during the hot months because Nigel's going off to Chennai, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm going off to Chennai and then the British Championships, and
yeah. I'll be in Hamburg and I'll be in Spain. So we're moving around high speed. That is in British Airways. Let me tell you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks very much for watching, everybody, and thank you, Andrew.
Yeah, hope you enjoyed it, and see you soon.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Bye.